Hey there, friends. Today we have a special guest on the video, 242 Reads. She's a good friend of mine, a good friend of the channel. She's been on my channel once or twice. I've been on her channel numerous times as well. So if you would, please just show her the same love you'd show me. And, of course, constructive criticism is always welcomed. So long as it's constructive. You know what I mean. And of course, thank you. So, this story is about the weirdest night shift I ever had. Maybe not the creepiest, as I have certainly dealt with my share of creeps and people that were blazed out of their mind. Not looking down on people that deal with addiction, just saying they can do some terrifying things. I've obviously had my fair share of weird people stumble through the door on my overnight shift at the station where I work. But this night takes the cake. It was one of those shifts that kind of started off crappy. I was the only one working because the other overnight attendant was out sick with COVID. But of course, instead of the boss scheduling someone else, he just told me to suck it up and that things would be fine with just one person. He's kind of a cheapskate, obviously. Anyways, it's around 2 a.m. when this random guy walks into the station. Average height, a bit hefty, but mostly nondescript. He's got longer, greasy hair, but that doesn't mean much. Most of the customers on the overnight come in looking like they don't really believe in self-care. One thing I noted about him, though, was that he had an intense look on his face. Like he was there with purpose. Now, I have been robbed before, and the guy had that same look. But he immediately walked to the counter and told me to give him the cash. This guy had the look, but turned and asked me if we carried RC Cola. I told him that we did, 2 liters and single-serve bottles, and mentioned that it was right by the Dr. Pepper in the second door from the left. Yes, I have the store's layout memorized. He heads over, grabs 3 bottles of RC, and a bag of the TGI Fridays potato skin chips, and drops them on the counter. I ring him up and tell him his total. He pulls a few bills from his pocket. He then starts fumbling around for a moment, and then mumbles an apology. That's when I notice he's about $2 and some change short on the purchase. I figure, based on this guy's intense frustration over not having the cash, that he'd had one hell of a night already. So I tell him, "Hey man, I got $2 on me. Don't sweat it. I'll cover the rest. You just have a good rest of the night, alright?" He starts to ask me if I'm sure, saying that he could just put something back, but I wave him off, saying it's cool and to just pay it forward in the future if he can. He then gives me the biggest grin I've seen someone give. Like, I literally just changed his life, and then he reaches into his pocket. Now, at first, I'm thinking this was a test, and this guy was going to give me $100 for being kind. A guy can dream, right? But then he slides a handgun out of the inner pocket of his jacket. Yeah, a gun. And I immediately think that I'm about to get robbed again. But the way he took the gun out didn't make sense for that to be his plan. He didn't do so threateningly. He pulled it out almost carefully, respectfully even. He then gently placed it on the counter and slid it over to me. "Here," he said with his voice low and quiet. "Take this as my way of saying thanks. It'll save your life." Then, he gives me that same smile, a slight nod, and just walks out with his RC and potato chips. So, there I am, alone in a gas station at 2-something in the morning, with a dirty handgun sitting on my counter. I'm thinking that this has to be a joke. There's no way that some dude just left a gun there as a payment for me covering $2. My second thought is that something worse is going to happen, and I'm about to die like it's some kind of messed up horror movie. But nothing happens. The guy is just gone. The gun is sitting there, and for several moments I'm just staring at it in silence. I grabbed some plastic gloves from under the counter. There was no way I was touching that thing barehanded, and put the gun in a plastic bag and then placed that on the floor behind me, and called the cops. The officers arrive, and they ask about a call they got saying that someone had found a gun in the store. I had to correct them, and explain that I didn't find the gun, that I was given the gun. And they both looked at me like I was crazy or telling an awful joke. I explain what happened, and they both have this same look of, "This guy's high," on their face. But I assure them the whole thing played out just like I said. I even showed them the security footage of the guy putting it down and sliding it toward me. They take the gun, thank me, and tell me they'll be in touch if they have any further questions, and then tell me to call them if I see the guy again. The rest of the shift, I was nervous, thinking that this guy may come back for his weapon, realizing he gave it away to a stranger, but it was a relatively quiet night after that. I seriously felt crazy. Like, who gives a gun to a gas station attendant as a thank you for buying their damn potato chips for them? Here's where things got truly bizarre, though. About a week or so later, one of the officers come back while he's off duty to get some coffee. But he recognizes me, and he decides to fill me in on a bit of information. Turns out, the gun was hot. It had been stolen, and potentially used in a homicide a little while back, about 3 blocks from my gas station. They were still trying to piece everything together, but this was a huge lead for them in that case, since they now had the weapon and the guy's fingerprints on it, as well as the footage from the store. So, in the end, him, I guess, gifting me this gun was a good thing, because it helped to potentially solve a robbery/homicide from a while back. Of course, I have no idea why he thought I should have the gun, as if I wasn't going to call the police and give it to them. But maybe he really thought I wouldn't? No clue. I worked that overnight shift for about 6 months after that, but I hit a point where I wanted to change things up. So I moved to days at the same station. Thankfully, nothing more like that has ever happened since. Neither to me, nor the poor souls that work the overnights there now. There have been other weird and creepy things for sure, but nothing quite like that.
I used to be a janitor at a small high school in the town where I grew up. I actually attended this high school, though when I attended it, things were outdated and the buildings were pretty much ancient. My time as a janitor was many years after I graduated, and no, it wasn't my ideal career choice. It was just a job that I needed to pay my rent. Because it was a small district and a small high school, I was the only janitor at the building. Because I was the only janitor, I usually had to work pretty late into the nights twice a week to deep clean parts of the school. Those were usually Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is important because the night this happened was one of them. I don't remember which exactly, but it was one of my late night cleaning sessions. On this night, I had to deep clean the west wing of the school, which was math and science pods. I typically started in the math pods. There was not much in the way of a mess when it comes to numbers, and then would add up late at night in the science rooms. I was cleaning one of the biology labs, mopping the floor, gathering the trash cans, when I heard what sounded like a door slamming coming from the hallways. I jumped a bit. The bang was a sharp contrast to the silence that typically filled the rooms. I almost wasn't certain that I heard anything at all, since it was so abrupt, but when I stepped out into the hallway, I heard what sounded like a chair scraping across the tile of one of the rooms. You know the sound, that shrill screeching sound that makes you cringe. For whatever reason, I decided I would check it out and see what was in the room. Obviously, no one else was supposed to be here. but I guess I thought it was my responsibility to keep the building safe. I stepped out and towards the other science room, where I was certain I had heard the sound. I looked in the small window of the door and saw movement off to the side. I couldn't quite tell who it was at first, so I knew I had to confront them directly. I opened the door slowly and glanced in, and breathed a sigh of relief. I saw the back of Mr. Franklin, the well-loved biology teacher. He was just standing in the corner of the room, staring out the window. I opened the door the rest of the way and said hello to him and mentioned that he scared the living daylights out of me. Mr. Franklin was a good guy, very sociable, so I was a bit surprised when he didn't turn around to greet me. At first I was confused, but then it kinda clicked that this man was standing in his classroom at 10 at night and staring out into the night sky, so odds were that he wasn't in a good mood. No one goes to work in the middle of the night and stares longingly into the darkness if they're having a good night, right? I decided I could take the hint and just said, "Alright, well, you have a good night, Mr. Franklin. Remember to lock up when you leave." Just trying to be polite and gentle about the situation. I went ahead and finished up cleaning the other room and the hallway and then called it a night. I didn't see Mr. Franklin leave before I did, but I wasn't going to bother him any more than I had. The next day I came into work as normal and clocked in, but I noticed that some of the other staff in the main office looked like they were upset. I asked if something was going on, and what I was told legitimately sent a chill down my spine. Sasha, the front desk clerk, told me that Franklin was in the hospital and wasn't expected to make it. Shocked, I mentioned that I had just seen him the night before and asked what had happened to him. He then told me that shortly after he got home after leaving the school for the afternoon, he apparently had a massive stroke. His wife called an ambulance and the paramedics came and got him, but he was basically on life support. They had very little expectation of him pulling through. It was a very upsetting thing to hear, and it definitely made me feel sad about seeing him the night before, thinking that I was probably the last person to work there to see him. But then it clicked. She said the afternoon, not the night. I asked her if she knew when he had been taken to the hospital, and she said that his wife had found him around 5:30 the evening prior, a full 5 hours before I saw him in his classroom. I had seen him long after he'd been taken to the hospital, so there was no logical way for him to have been in his room. The whole thing made my blood run cold. If he was already in a coma, plugged into life support, how had I seen him standing in his classroom like that? The only explanation I could think of was that he, in some spiritual form, decided he wanted to visit his classroom one last time, and I just happened to be there. It explained why he didn't reply to me, why he seemed to be solemnly staring into the darkness from the window. Sadly, Mr. Franklin did not make it, and the school had a lovely memorial for him after he passed, including a plaque with his face hung up in the room where he taught for 35 years. The same room I happened to see him one last time. It was chilling, sure, but it was also kinda heartwarming to know that I got to see him one last time in an environment that he loved before he left this mortal coil.
Hi Raven. I discovered your channel a few months ago and really enjoy your content. There will be 3 separate stories here as they are all very short. The first one happened over 18 years ago. At the time, I was working a night audit shift for a hotel right outside the city of Pittsburgh. This particular night was busy for us, as it was New Year's Eve. Lots of people were coming in and out of the main lobby for pretty much the whole night, going to and from their parties or to the bars, and it was a busy night for me. Around 1 a.m. or so, a tall, thin man came in appearing to be in distress and out of breath. He approached the front desk, which I was standing behind, and he told me that he needed a cab. His tone was urgent, but I couldn't figure out why. He didn't mention his car breaking down or where he was going either, so I wasn't sure why he needed a cab exactly. He also failed to give me a name and a room number, so I didn't know if the man was staying with us. Come to think of it, why did he ask a hotel for a cab when there was a 24-hour gas station right up the road? It became obvious quickly that he was not a guest at our hotel, so I was suspicious. Yet, I wanted him out of my hair, so I figured I would call a cab and have him wait outside. Again, this was a very busy and stressful night for me, and besides that, I was suspicious and figured calling a cab for him might defuse him. Anyway, after he asked for a cab, I sat down and lifted the receiver to my ear and started to dial yellow cab, but stopped after the man said something else to interrupt me. "You aren't calling the police, are you?" he asked. I glanced up at him. My pulse raced when I saw the menacing in his eyes, and his face was beet red. I leaned back in my chair, unsure of what the man would do. I denied calling the police to him, but the man continued to stare me down. "Don't lie to me," he said. Again, I denied it, but it was clear that he didn't believe me. When he finally turned around and stormed out, relief washed over me, even though he called me an expletive as he walked through the door. I could easily let the cussing me out part roll off my back knowing he was gone, and thankfully would never come back. In retrospect, there's no telling what the man would do if there hadn't been so many people around to witness it. He may have just been a man drunk on New Year's Eve looking to get home. On the other hand, working the night shift had made me familiar with the smell of alcohol on someone's breath, and I don't recall smelling it. He may have been on something stronger, something that may have made him aggressive. Either way, in that situation, it made working the night shift each night by me for so long all the scarier. The next story took place about 4 years after the first one. It was 2010, and again I had the night audit position, this time at a different hotel, about 12 minutes from Pittsburgh International Airport. This hotel had a business center where our guests could print up their boarding passes for their flights. One night, a man came in around 3 a.m. and said he needed to use a computer. I had my suspicions, but I gave him directions to the business center anyway. "It's down the hall on the left," I told him. I figured giving him the benefit of the doubt was a better approach than being suspicious without legit cause. He thanked me and went down, trying to get in but couldn't because he had no key. He returned a few minutes later and said, "It's locked." "You'll need your room key to access the room," I responded. "I don't think you understand. I'm not a guest at this hotel." I then immediately informed him that the business center is only for our guests. He shook his head. "It'd only take a few minutes. I just need to do one thing." "Sorry," I said, "but if you're not a guest here, you'll have to leave." I waited silently for a long minute before the man left the premises and didn't come back. The encounter wasn't all that scary, but it still creeped me out. I wondered why the guy, being a non-guest, would come into some hotel and ask to use a computer just out of the blue, especially in the middle of the night like that. This last story will be brief. That same night, another man came in and approached the front desk. He looked anxious and fumbled for words for a bit, before managing to spit out that he needed to use the bathroom. Well, I was 1 for 0 in my strange encounters for the night, but I didn't want to push my luck, so I let him use it. He walked to the bathroom, which was in the hall beside our front desk, and then left without incident. It was uneventful in the end, but I couldn't help but wonder if the guy had planned on doing something to me, but maybe chickened out at the last minute. What would he have done? possibly held me at gunpoint to rob me, and I didn't want to think of the other possibilities. The encounters I had with strangers that night, and the first one, are reminders that we're not always safe during the night shift, even if we feel that we are. Especially when you work with the public all night, as I did in those years. If you're listening to this, and you work at night, remember to always be on your guard. In fact, it's better to have someone working with you instead of just being by yourself. Because when you're in that situation, someone might come along and try to take advantage of you. Don't be fooled into thinking that just because you work in a well-lit area and are around other 24-hour businesses, that you aren't vulnerable to horrible people.
Okay, so I have quite a few of the night shift stories to share with you. This one's straight out of my weird stuff that happened to me folder, and I'll send you more later, but this one needs to be heard. I used to work the graveyard shift at an old run-down convenience store that was off of the highway. We weren't too close to town, but there were a few houses here and there littered around the exit. So honestly, we weren't usually too busy overnight. But boss wanted to use a 24/7 in case we got some late night highway drivers. Most nights, I would just sit at the corner reading my Kindle or my laptop, diving into true crime stuff on YouTube. This night, the Wi-Fi was actually down at the store, and it was just me and the eerie feeling that you get at 3 a.m. I was mindlessly restocking shelves when I heard the sound of an engine outside. It looked like a small work van, and they had pulled up to the pump, so I just figured they would fill their tank and head out. Like everyone else does that late. I just went back to restocking and thought nothing of it. After I emptied that box of potato chips, I looked up and noticed the van was still there, sitting with the headlights on, and I could see the exhaust, so I knew the car was still running. It had been about 20 or so minutes, so it was a bit strange that they were still there. But it was what it was. Curiosity got the better of me, and I needed to go collect the trash at the pumps anyway, so I walked out and figured I'd see what was going on. I grabbed my cell phone and head out. I got out to the work van, but there was no one in the driver's seat, no one in the passenger seat, and no one around at the pump. It was a bit weird, but I thought that maybe the person was sleeping in the back or something. The back windows were painted over so I couldn't see in, and there was a blanket hanging up behind the front seats, so I couldn't see the back from the front of the van. Honestly, it was none of my business, and I didn't plan to snoop any further than that. I grabbed the trash and took them to the dumpster, got back to the trash can around 10 minutes later to put a new bag in, and the van was still sitting there, running. I still couldn't see anyone inside, and at this point, I was starting to get a bit confused and suspicious. I walked towards the van and lightly tapped on the driver's side window, seeing if someone was in the back. I called out, "Hey, is anyone in there? I can't have you sleeping at the pump. If you want, you can move to the side and sleep. I won't mind." After I said this, I heard a strange, soft sound coming from the back. It almost sounded like a whimper. At this point, my nonchalant attitude took a backseat to a slight bit of worry. Was someone in the back of the van and injured? Was it left by an assailant, so I would call the cops or something? I got a bit closer and knocked again, asking if the person was alright. And all I heard was more of the same and some scratching, like they were struggling or scratching at the door, trying to get it open. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and was ready to call 911, thinking that this was going to be a big situation. But as soon as I started to dial, the back door clicked and opened slowly. I expected to see someone tied up and dying, but what I saw was a very fluffy and confused dog. He was standing there staring at me, panting and whimpering, like he He was unsure about whether or not I was friendly. At the same time, I heard the sound of someone running in the parking lot. I quickly turned and saw that this burly guy running in my direction. At first, I was thinking that this was some kind of messed up trap or something, that he was about to tackle me or rob me. This guy slows down and bends over, gasping like he was super out of breath. I asked if he was alright, then he laughed and stepped forward again, and then put my fears to rest. So the long short of what happened, while I was stocking the shelves, this guy pulled up to get gas. He got out of his car and went to grab the pump, when he realized that he forgot to turn the engine off. He went back to his door to go and shut the car off, and his dog had managed to hit the door lock button. He had apparently tried to get the dog to step up on the door again and hit the button. Obviously, that didn't work. After a bit, he realized he was going to have to run to his house, a solid 25-minute jog, got his spare car key, and came back to unlock the van. At some point, while he was gone, I came out to check the van out and had my scary little moment. And his dog had managed to push the lever down on the door inside to open it. At about the same time, he showed back up. We both laughed about it for a few minutes. I told him that the whole thing had me freaked out because I heard what it sounded like a scared whimpering in the back, and I was about to call the cops. He apologized and said he should have come in and told me, but he was already tired and frustrated and just wanted to get his key as quickly as possible and get back. He grabbed the key and came in and got some coffee, and we chatted for another minute or two. I pet the puppy. He was very friendly, thankful, and that was that. I know that the ending of the story wasn't scary, but the lead up to it had me seriously shaking, thinking I was about to step into something I didn't want to be a part of. Thankfully, that wasn't how it all played out.
Well, hey, hi, howdy. That video, my friends, if you didn't know, which I don't know how you wouldn't know, you clicked on the video with the title and the thumbnail and so forth, was a collection of some night shift stories. I'm currently looking at a thumbnail for a different video, so I almost said that video. It is not that video. This was night shift. Night shift stories that happen on the last shift at work. It's always the scariest things that happen overnight, right? It's like the nighttime attracts the scary. The nighttime working attracts the scary people. That was a weird thing I just said. Anyways, hopefully y'all enjoyed the stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. And if you're feeling so bold, you can go over to 242 Reads' channel, linked in the description and title, and check her out. She's a good friend of mine. She's been doing this for a while, and she recently hit 3K subs, so that's pretty cool. Congrats to her, of course. I have a feeling our audiences overlap a bit, though, because I know I've seen a lot of you over there and a lot of people from over there over here. Again, we've worked together in the past, so yeah. Thank you, 242, for narrating some of these stories for me. It was appreciated. Absolutely appreciated. I've been doing this all month, and I'm kind of getting a little throat sore. That could also be because it's almost 11 o'clock, but neither here nor there. Anyways, friends, if you enjoyed the video, thumbs up, subscribe, comment down below your thoughts, how you're doing. Constructive criticism is always welcome, so long as it's constructive, as I said. You can also join Patreon or memberships for early access to content like this or other content, depending on how you sign up and what you sign up for. You can also do a super thanks to the channel, which is just a tip or donation to the channel. Helps me live, I guess. And is always appreciated. Never expected, though. Anyways, friends, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.